Good evening. I'm delighted to be joined by Fr Seán Sheehy this evening to talk about personal and communal gratitude in society. I first began exploring the idea of recognizing and even rewarding gratitude back in 2003. This is an ongoing project with me, and of course, artificial intelligence helps a great deal nowadays, and that's helped me to make it to progress. So tonight we're reflecting on both personal and communal gratitude in growing communities in Ireland. Gratitude is often seen as simple good manners, but many great thinkers have understood it as something far deeper, a force that binds communities together and sustains those who dedicate their lives to serving others. When gratitude fades, relationships tend to dissolve, I've noticed. And in modern life, particularly in large towns and cities, priests and caregivers often carry immense emotional labor. They walk alongside people with grief, crisis, and personal struggles, sometimes for weeks or months. While gratitude may be deeply felt, it isn't always expressed, and over time, this can lead to loneliness, even in lives devoted to service. Good evening, Father Seán, and how are you?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm very, very good, and this is a very, very interesting subject that's as I say, going back to 2003, I was working as a
Mhm.
security guard at night time, and I spent weeks working on this particular subject and returned to it
Mhm.
in computer science in 2010, and I continue to do a little bit more and more because as I see societies expanding, I think gratitude will become central to a lot of things to help cohesion in society, you know. So my first question is for you. I'm particularly interested because of you're a priest and you've helped very, very many people through difficult times. Do they all show you some form of gratitude? Is what I'm wondering.
Not really.
Okay.
I think that they kind of expect the priest to help them, and they don't, probably many don't even think about it. They don't really see the need, maybe to thank the priest. And of course, I mean, as a priest, I mean, I don't do what I do, obviously, to be thanked. My motivation is always, or I try to make it my motivation, that because the Lord reminds me, He said, "Look what you do for others." Go back to Matthew 25. What you do for others, you do for me. And He also reminds us that whatever you do for others, that God is never outdone in His generosity, and certainly God always provides a reward, and it comes in various ways. But when I was a child, we were told, look, when somebody gives you something or they do something for you, always make sure that you thank you. And I mean, even as a child, I remember, my mother was saying, okay, when somebody gave me some, what do you say? Say thank you. I see some parents do that today, but I think we live in a society today where that whole idea of being grateful or being thankful doesn't seem to be very dominant. I think people have expectations, that they should be given this or given that or whatever, and they don't see any need at all to be thankful. I think entitlement has kind of taken over, or like some of the ads say, you should get this because you deserve it. So also, I think the closer I think that a society is, the more you will find gratitude. Uh, the I suppose the less connected a society is, the less will be the gratitude. And I think that's why it is, I think, something that needs to be addressed today, especially since Irish society seems to be somewhat disconnected. I mean, I think I mentioned this to you before that the last census said that one out of every 10 felt they had no friends. I mean, friends actually are grateful to each other, they help each other. So if a person has no friends, then of course they don't have anybody, to thank them or to recognize their existence or whatever. There's also another dimension, I guess we'll talk about as we go, and that is the whole area of affirmation, which is very important as well. But to answer your question, no, very few actually come back, and say, "Oh, thank you, for that advice, or thank you for the time you gave me, or whatever. But I don't look for it myself. I really don't. Because I think I've often said to parents, if you only do for your children, what they will thank you for, you're going to be, you're going to be very disillusioned and be very upset. So you do what you do because you
Okay.
believe in it yourself.
Okay. And then you have this obviously the strength to carry on. And in your case, obviously you're doing this for God. Um,
Yes.
do you ever feel that people somehow see you as superhuman, or that you're armored by God and therefore you don't need gratitude like the rest of us? Do people put you on maybe perhaps a pedestal in
Well,
sort of
yeah.
ways?
Well, I think that was more so in the past than it is really in the present. I think like when I was growing up, I mean, the priest was really on the pedestal, and when the priest came, to visit, he was ushered into the parlor and whatnot. And there is a kind of an expectation, that the priest represents God, and his time belongs to others, in other words, and other people kind of have a right to his time. So there's not always a deep appreciation of the fact that the priest is a human being who's a sinner trying to be saved or trying to be a saint, and that he does need time. He does need time to get away, and the expectations oftentimes are unreal. A little bit like children's expectation of their parents. They're often unreal. Children don't realize their parents are human beings. They work hard. They're tired. They're not always in good form, and so on. Same thing is true, I think, of the priest vis-a-vis the people. So, uh, and the other thing is, of course, that when people come to the priest, to pray for them or to give them advice or whatever it is, that he is representing God, and God does things in His time, not in the not in the priest's time, or the person who's looking for help, not in that person's time, in His time. And people also, like when they expect, I think, immediate cure, and sometimes, even when the priest administers a sacrament to them, they don't let the grace of God work on them. They think it all should be effective immediately. I remember actually a man coming by, and he was having, I don't know, serious um, uh, pain problems with his leg. So I, have a relic of the true cross. So I blessed him, with it. Well, he calls me up the next day and said, "Well, Father, your relic didn't do me much good."
Oh God, no.
I said, "Well, I said, you need to give God a chance," I said, "to work in you." And I said, "You're probably so stubborn that you won't even let God's grace work in you." So, you know, and obviously the poor man was in pain, and so he was venting. But
Yes.
that's what you find oftentimes.
Okay. Is it ever appropriate? I'm going to come on
By the
to a
way,
story.
I
Yeah,
just want to
sorry.
say this, that like actually that's what faith is all about. Faith, go back to the letter to the Hebrews in chapter 11. Faith is constant assurance concerning what you hope for and conviction about things you don't see. So, we operate on hope, and we operate on the belief that, if you're really open to God, then He will do the work. But we get impatient, and our expectations are unrealistic, and so on and so forth. So ultimately, it makes you humble. It actually makes you humble,
Makes you
uh,
humble.
because, because you have to tell people, look, I'm limited, I have limitations. And I know, God can work things through me that I can't work for myself, but I have to accept, the way things are, and so on. So
And you mentioned a good point as well about faith there. I mean, there's a lot of people, of course, that have lots of religion, but they've no faith. Um,
that's right.
I want to say to you anyway, so is it appropriate for somebody to seek gratitude? So they ask for gratitude. And I'm going to come on to a story in a minute where it happened to
Uh,
me. Hmm.
yeah, personally, you know, it might be, but personally, I mean, I would never ask, for gratitude. I guess personally, like if I reach out to somebody or somebody asks for help, I actually feel grateful to be able, to serve that person, to be able to serve God, or serve others to the best of my ability, and that helps a whole lot. And I know, of course, that whatever I do for others I'm aided and abetted, so to speak, by the grace of God. But there is such a thing as affirmation, and affirmation is very important. Excuse me, I was talking to a woman there some time ago, and she told me she was in one of the cities here in this country, and she was walking down the street, and she came across a homeless man, and she stopped and asked him his name and how long he'd been homeless and did he have a family. So anyway, she spent some time with him, and he said to her, he said, you were the first person in a week, he said, that recognized my existence. And so gratitude actually is a form of affirmation, and every human being needs affirmation. I've often said that there's what I call it the AAA of mental health. And the AAA of mental health is that every human being needs their existence to be acknowledged. They need their efforts and their gifts to be affirmed, and they need affection. And whenever you meet somebody who is down, or somebody who is depressing, or somebody who is feeling out of it, one or more of those three is missing. And so affirmation, I mean, gratitude is actually an act of affirmation as well. And that's very important because we all need affirmation because nobody wants to be taken for granted. Nobody wants to be an anonymous person unless you've stolen something and you don't want anybody to find you. But ordinarily, nobody wants to be taken for granted. Nobody wants to be anonymous. We all need our existence to recognize, and gratitude actually does that for many.
Okay. Um, many, many years ago in the early 90s, I was tumming a lift from Tralee with a friend of mine, and this 500 series Mercedes pulled up, beautiful car. And I thought, wow, we're actually getting a lift in style today. So I hopped into it with my friend, and in the back seat, there was bags and bags, thousands and thousands of pounds of cash. Okay. And we thought, this guy, who is he? And we were driving along anyway. And he turned out to be the man was Patsy Burns. And Patsy Burns, okay, went on to be, he was very successful at the time, but he went on to build the Olympic Stadium in the London and the Shard and the Emirates Stadium and a whole lot of other places. And he said to us, lads, I'll bring you for a couple of pints on the halfway bar on the way to Listowel, if you want. And I said, yeah, sure, why not? Yeah. So we went into the halfway bar and he kept buying rounds for the whole bar. And then he drove us on to, he told us a story about his son. He said he was very proud of his son. The reason I'm telling this story as well, of course, is because Patsy passed away at the age of 64, and I just thought he was quite a remarkable human being. But the thing about Patsy anyway was he told us the story about his son while we were in the halfway bar, and he said that I'm very proud of my son. Do you know why? And I said, why? And Patsy would have been about his early 40s at this stage. He said, well, my son was in London and he lost his wallet. He couldn't get home, no money for a taxi, and he sold the shirt off his back. Now that's what you call resourceful. I was so proud of my son, he said to me, okay? He got home without his shirt, but he got home. Okay. And I never
Yeah.
forgot him telling this story. Anyway, he drove us onto Listowel. He said, lads, I live in Dewall, but I'm going to drop us into Listowel anyway, and we'll have a chat in Listowel. So as we were getting out of the car, he says, I want you to do me one favor. And we said, what's that, Patsy? And he said, I want you to tell people that you met Patsy Burns and that I treated you very well. And that was it. And I was thinking to myself, this guy is actually kind of asking for gratitude. And he's actually right. He's asserting himself. And I think that there are ways probably to ask for, like, for example, if I was a theologian, if I was a priest, and I helped a woman, say, for maybe 2 or 3 months, I counseled her through whatever it was. I think what I would be saying to her would be something like, Mary, now I want you to, for my own peace of mind, I want you to come back to me and maybe in 6 months' time or send me a letter. Let me know how I helped you, how your story transgressed. I think that would be my way of dealing with it. And I think that would be probably a nice way. What would you think of asking for gratitude?
Like I said, I would not do it myself. I really wouldn't. You see, like you're talking about that man now, Mr. Byrne, but you see, rich people actually, a lot of the gratitude they get is fake. In other words, people are only grateful to them for what they can get. they're not grateful. They're not grateful for knowing the person in terms of who he or she is, and that makes a big difference. It's almost like I'll express my gratitude when you give me something. Whereas I really need to express my gratitude because of who you are and because that you exist, because you're actually, a blessing from God, regardless of whether I get something from you or not. It's like at funerals, you hear people say all kind of nice things about the person, who can't hear them, but they never say to them while they're alive. I mean, it's unbelievable. And I don't know why. I don't know why. You heard the story, for example, about the woman who complained to her husband. She said, "Honey, you never tell me that you love me anymore." And he said, "Woman, didn't I marry you?" See, people people don't realize that thanking somebody for something is not a one-off. It's not a one-off, as they say. It should be an ongoing thing.
No,
But
no,
again, we just take things for granted
we do.
until suddenly the person is no longer there, and then it's too late. But I wouldn't, to answer your question, no, I would not ask anybody. I just say, look, I hope you do well, and if I met them afterwards, I would say, well, how are you? How are you doing, or how you be? I usually say, I don't say how you doing, I say how you being, because you have to be before you can do. And sometimes they say fine, sometimes they don't, so.
Okay. Going back to our kind of our first question, when someone discusses a deeply personal problem with a priest and receives support over weeks and months, perhaps expressing gratitude later might reopen old wounds, so they avoid it. Could this, I wonder, be part of the reason why people don't come back and say, "Oh, thank you, Father, you helped me so much, and I'm so appreciative"? Do you think that plays a part in it, that it might open an old
Uh,
wound?
yeah, yeah, I guess I don't know. I don't know. Um, but I mean, I would say if all wounds, are reopened, because the person is expressing gratitude, then are being thankful for whatever the caregiver gave them. Then to me, that means actually that the healing hasn't taken place, and that maybe the wound needs to be reopened. And I'll tell you where I've seen that actually very clearly is in case of divorce, where the person didn't instigate the divorce themselves, but they wanted, and they were Catholic. And when I would recommend, look, you need to go before the marriage tribunal and see whether or not, your marriage was a true marriage to begin with. Very often, actually, they don't go through the annulment process because it would open all these wounds, like you said. But also, I have seen it where reopening the wounds, going through the annulment process, had a healing effect because oftentimes people bury their hurts and they're not healed. And it's only actually, when something triggers them again that they begin to address them and now are no longer afraid to look at them. And so healing takes place. So, I'm not sure, if that would trigger the reopening of wounds, but the reopening of wounds is not necessarily a bad thing. Because, like I said, if they are so easily reopened, then that means that they've just been buried or are pushed into the denial compartment of the human person. And they do need to be reopened in order to be remedicated, so to speak, so that they can actually heal.
Okay. Um, Philosopher Marcus Cicero said that gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. Would you agree with that statement?
No, that's good old. Yeah, I mean, I studied when I was in secondary school. We studied Cicero, and I wouldn't agree with him. And you know why I wouldn't agree with him?
Why?
Because like love actually is the greatest of all virtues. St. Paul says there's faith, hope, and love, and he said the greatest of these, he says, is love. Because uh, uh, although St. Augustine turned it around, St. Augustine said There are three divine virtues: faith, hope, and love. And the grace of these is hope, because he said, hope is faith and love in action. But like to me, apart from the Bible, love is the greatest virtue, because actually gratitude flows from love. People express great gratitude to others, or gratefulness, because it's the result actually of knowing that you are loved. When somebody does something for you, or gives you something, or says something positive to you, and so when somebody is grateful, it's because they've experienced love in some way, shape, or form. So we're grateful then for what we have received, and I think that's where gratitude comes from. And we're also grateful too for what we can give. And actually, in both giving and receiving, both of which actually are acts of love, and they do evoke a sense of gratitude for what one has received, and a sense of gratitude for what one can give. So I see gratitude flowing from love. And that's why I say love is the greatest of all the virtues. Because, like St. Paul says, you know, uh, love is basic sacrificial. And like Jesus says, there's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. And to love means to really and truly give yourself. And when you really and truly give yourself, then that in itself actually evokes gratitude. Love always evokes gratitude.
Okay, so love is the king of virtues. Our friend St. Thomas Aquinas saw gratitude as duty of justice. Kant saw it as respect for human dignity. These are all philosophers. And Seneca stressed that unexpressed gratitude erodes relationships. I can see that. From your experience, how important is it that gratitude is actually expressed rather than just felt? So the give and take here.
Well, when you look at it, expressing gratitude is about recognizing that you, as I said, that you are loved, that someone has shown affection towards you. And expressing gratitude actually is the antidote to selfishness. It's the antidote to greed. It's the antidote to pride. It's the antidote to entitlement. And it's actually, again, as I said earlier, it's an act of love. And as such, then it makes us actually conscious that as we have received, so too we must give. And Jesus himself said, the measure that you measure with will be measured back to you. So I think, yeah, gratitude is essential for a healthy relationship. Like I said, about the man and his wife. Woman, haven't I married you? Well, yeah, of course you married her, but has she have you expressed your love for her in the meantime? Have you recognized the sacrifice that she's made for you? Have you recognized the gifts that she's shared with you, and so on, during the period of time? Gratitude actually expresses the fact that we're not self-sufficient. And the more I realize I'm not sufficient, then the more I appreciate the gifts that you have, because I don't have all the gifts, and there will be times in my life when I need a gift that I don't have, but you do. And so when you share that gift with me, then a grateful response means that I recognize what you have given me, and that I recognize that the fact that you gave it to me was a sign of your affection for me as a human being. So without gratitude, I think relationships are impossible.
Okay. And finally, continuing with immigration, we've been covering immigration over the last couple of weeks. Just continuing immigration to Ireland and the increasing depersonalization of our cities and communities that comes with the territory. How can government and local communities encourage communal gratitude so that those who serve are not invisible? I remember during the COVID, one thing that was good that the government did a campaign. You'd see signs up about praising the HSE workers, and that was kind of a communal gratitude. If you, I don't know if you remember that. Um, and you mentioned there earlier on, you were saying, that your parents would say, and Irish parents did actually, my own parents did. You always say, oh, if the stranger gives you something, say thank you.
Hmm.
And there was all these like little small pieces of communal gratitude, and then there was programs I remember in the 1980s when I was a child, and they stuck with me always, where we were told to show gratitude to the tourists by waving at them and smiling. And of course, the Germans thought we were weird. Okay.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
so what do you think? How would you encourage like the depersonalization probably, or the communal gratitude in a society that's rapidly changing like Ireland's?
Well, I would say right off that depersonalization comes from the absence of God, because because human dignity and human respect flow from the fact that each individual is created by God with inalienable rights and deserves to be respected, deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of their behavior, just because they've been created by God. And I think that since all good things come from God, then I think this is where the church is crucial. The church then alone has the capacity and the grace and the power and the authority to raise people's consciousness that they are beneficiaries of God's gifts, and as a result of being a beneficiary of God's gifts, that they also have a duty to give thanks to God. And it's actually in thanking God then that we become more conscious of being thankful to all those who are helping us, being thankful actually for their existence, and the gifts that they bring. And so, giving thanks to God, and giving thanks, I think, or being grateful to other people, and to eliminate depersonalization, we need we need God. We need the preaching of the church. We need, because only God actually can highlight the dignity of the person. The government can't do it. I mean, let's face it, the government reflects the people. So if the people are depersonalized, so the government, is also going to be depersonalized. If the people don't really have a mutual respect and a sense of dignity toward one another, I guarantee you the government won't. And so it's the job of the church actually to highlight the fact that God is the only answer to depersonalization, and to help people to understand clearly that they are creations of God. And as such, they owe a debt of gratitude to God. I mean, look at people even, who are baptized, Catholics, for example. They don't go to Mass on Sunday. And they go elsewhere. They go to the malls, they go here and there. And yet they refuse to go to Mass and give thanks to God for the blessings that they have. And then there's a lot of hypocrisy. Then when something goes wrong with them, they're running, asking for prayers and all the rest of that stuff as well. But again, there's an absence of God in Ireland, for example, and I think that has contributed greatly to the depersonalization that you refer to. And it's only through calling the nation to the existence of God, which was there in my days growing up. People were very conscious of God. They really had a built-in faith. That didn't mean they were perfect, but they had a built-in faith. But how many times, for example, did I hear my mother say, "Oh, you must thank God, you must be grateful to Him, because He's your protector, and if it weren't for Him, things would be so much worse." It was part and parcel of the culture. But now the culture is purely materialistic, and now people think that material things will provide them with happiness and will make them self-sufficient, and it won't. It won't. Like Thomas Aquinas has said, what can be taken away from you can make you happy. And that's why people are unhappy, because what they look to give themselves a sense of success and a sense of well-being leaves them disappointed. Only the creator can fulfill the deepest yearnings of the creature. And the deepest yearning of any human being is to be treated as a person, to be treated with dignity and respect. And that will not happen unless people come to know God and recognize that they are accountable to God, and that He looks at every person as His creation, and as a result, calls everybody to treat everybody else with respect and with dignity. The government can't do that. Communities can't do that. Only God can do that, and He has chosen His church to be the instrument through which He does it. So if the bishops and the clergy don't actually preach the Word of God and teach it, then the depersonalization will get even worse than it is today.
Okay, and going back to our friend gratitude, would it be fair to say, Father, the gratitude reminds us that we didn't get there alone?
Exactly,
Yes.
exactly. Exactly, and that I really can't function without you. I really, I can't function without society. I can't function without friendship because we are social creatures by nature, and that's why we need one another. That's why we need community. And again, that's what God created His church for, to create community. Every parish should be a vibrant community where people have a sense of belonging. And belonging is a key requirement for every person. That's what's so tragic about homeless people. They have no sense of belonging. And like I said earlier, one in every 10 people in this country said that they didn't belong to a community. No sense of belonging. No, I have no friends.
How would you suggest, Father, during Lent that people might show maybe personal gratitude or communal gratitude, or should they go out there and
I would say that in these subdivisions and whatnot, if you don't know the person next door, go knock on the door and say hello, how are you? This is who I am. I mean, I remember, and I can say that because my sister, she's no longer living, but I remember she and her husband, were living in Cork, and I was visiting there, and I said, well, who's your neighbor? Oh, I don't know, I don't know. And I said, well, have you ever gone? Oh, no, no, no. Have never. And I said, somebody actually has to get the ball rolling. But I've often said, to some parish priests, why don't you call the community together and celebrate yourselves as a community at least a couple of times a year, and invite all the people to come, have a barbecue or have a outdoor celebration. And I remember that happened one time. I was covering for a priest in Tralee and in Knockmoyle, the community up there had something like that, and it was great. The children were there, the teenagers were there. We celebrated a mass outdoors. They had, I know what you call it, potluck. They all brought food and had a great time. But that was the only time I saw that, and it's not done. It should be done in every parish.
I can tell you, Father, that the loneliest place in Ireland that I've ever been is Castleknock in Dublin. I've lived here for
Really?
years. Yeah, yeah. I lived in Castleknock for years, and I was probably the only connection people had in the neighborhood to each other because I'm quite a social character, you see. And it was frighteningly lonely. People, their neighbors would die and they wouldn't know, and they'd been living beside them for 30 years. So in
Yeah.
Castleknock, you'll find a lot of that, and you'll find a lack of religion also because they've loads of money and they think they don't need God.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I do think actually that the church in Ireland has a marvelous opportunity to come to the rescue of the country because the structure is there. The structure is built in. All they need is the leadership. I did see actually the past Ash Wednesday where the bishop in Waterford, he went out on the streets offering ashes to the people in the streets.
Oh wow.
And and it was cold, it was windy, but he did. Just that visibility and that outreach to people is extremely important. And to celebrate a parish, to celebrate itself as a community and invite all the people to come. you know, Obviously not everybody will come, but those who want to will. And I've often said, if you offer nothing, then there's nothing for people to respond to. But there is a great deal of loneliness and depression here in this country, and also I think even among young people, you know.
We're just out of time, Father, so I'd be
Okay.
very grateful if you give us your blessing.
May the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit descend on you and remain with you forever. Amen. God bless all of you.
Thank you very much, and good night, Father.
You're welcome.